Welcome to our post-debate analysis here after our Republican debate in the race for governor. Birchelle and I joined now by some of our In Focus panel here. Adam Wren from Politico, who's also the author of the Importantville newsletter on Indiana politics, and our political science professors, Dr. Laura Wilson from UIndy, Dr. Martin Sweet from Purdue University. The candidates are either lurking over our shoulders in these photographs of them behind us, or in some cases actually still in the room doing interviews afterwards as we talk about the debate tonight. And you know, the thing that sticks out to me in the polls of this race, and we've talked about it a lot, 43% of voters still undecided. Martin, I'll start with you first. Do you think that moved the needle in terms of anybody making the case, making that pitch to undecided voters tonight? Did anyone stand out above the rest?
Well, really the only direct appeal to undecided voters came from Lieutenant Governor Crouch, right? I think she had sort of probably the strongest close and made that essentially an acknowledgement of those undecided voters. You know, largely predictable answers from most of the candidates throughout the night. Chambers was, I think, feistiest and had sort of the most attacks. I'm not sure if that benefits him per se on his own, but it certainly probably went after Braun, which is probably what they really needed to do.
So let's talk, you spoke now of the second person here at the forefront in that poll, obviously Lieutenant Governor Susan Crouch, but now let's talk about Braun and his appeal to that 43%. He's polling now at 33%. So do you think he went far enough, Laura, in making that appeal to those voters?
Well, I think he definitely aimed to do that, right? And he was very successful in saying, look, I've been through this 6 years ago. He said that several times, right?
He mentioned that 2018 Senate race a lot.
A lot, and that was important because that was a major reference point for him, and especially in terms of what he's doing. He also talked about what he's done in the Senate, and he got some great challenges with regards to that from other opponents. But I think for each of the candidates, they had that opportunity to really be able to differentiate themselves, and I think we saw that on several of the issues they talked about this evening.
Adam, what were your takeaways from this debate tonight and these four Republican candidates on stage here in our studio?
I thought Mike Braun in a lot of ways held his own, and a sense
had
where
to punch back a lot.
Punched back a lot, was capable in doing that. I thought Brad Chambers entered the night with the most to sort of need to gain in terms of polls, and I thought he held his own as well. And I think this was his best debate that we've seen him do. And you know, Doden didn't really play to the question always. He kind of went with his own message and got his message out as much as possible.
Well, because our professors are here, I think we have to talk about the letter grade question and some surprises perhaps for those at home. So again, a reminder for you if you're just joining us, the debate question was a letter grade to rate Governor Eric Holcomb's time in office. And his partner, governing partner there at the administration said A or C. The A she gave him for economy and the status they feel the state is at now, but she gave him a C for his handling of COVID, which of course had been criticized often about limiting emergency powers and if he had gone too far.
She broke it out into a whole report card here.
So let me start first with you, Martin. What are your thoughts on that grade from his running mate and partner in the governor's mansion?
Well, I guess we know why Holcomb hasn't endorsed yet, right? I mean, boy, dance with the one that brung you, but what did she do? You know, she put something into the punch bowl here. That is, you're effectively attacking Holcomb. I mean, that's really what that is on the lockdowns. It also kind of rubs me a little bit as sort of passing the buck. I mean, where were you during this? Did you not have a voice? And if you didn't have a voice, what's wrong with you? Why were you not able to convince Holcomb? If you knew the answer back then, what happened to you?
She was lieutenant governor at the time.
So it seems a little off to do that. Chambers one, a full-on A, looked to me like he was sort of maybe trying to tee himself up for the Holcomb endorsement, right? That may be where he's going with that.
That was exactly what I thought. I was like, oh yeah, Holcomb hasn't endorsed yet, but who would want that, right? You saw that very clearly.
Well, and the governor's had a lot to say about these candidates here in recent days. We mentioned that in some of our pre-debate coverage today, and this was sort of the candidate's opportunity to speak about the governor and his time in office, but he's been pretty critical of the entire field here in recent days, saying they're not always talking about the right issues in his view.
Yeah, not only Governor Eric Holcomb, but his predecessor, Mitch Daniels, has said that he's somewhat unimpressed with these candidates. They're talking about national issues. They're not talking about state issues. But I was really, shocked at how much Suzanne Crouch has criticized Holcomb not only tonight but really throughout the primary. I mean, maybe she should step down from her position as lieutenant governor as she continues to campaign if she doesn't agree with the top of the ticket at this
We'll
point.
see what happens if there's an endorsement in any direction here coming in the days and weeks to come.
And so speaking now of what you just referenced, the former governor and outgoing governor, each somewhat seeming disappointed about the issues that are being spoken about. Do you feel as if this evening on the debate stage, they finally tackled some of these issues that the governors and perhaps the viewers and voters want to hear?
I felt they absolutely did. Even in terms of the time zone question, like that's a lot of people actually care about that. It was not necessarily that political
And that's why
issue.
we asked it. It hasn't been a big issue necessarily in this race, but it is something they
But I
said
appreciate it.
themselves
That
they get
people
asked
always
about a
say,
lot.
why do we do stuff like that? But I think there were a lot more state-focused questions, and that's been a lot of the criticism is, oh, it's national. Well, oftentimes because that's what voters know about. So if you're answering these questions and you're saying, like, look, these are things that are important, now voters know about those. That's going to come to the forefront of their mind,
Well,
too.
we had the hour. We've got about a binder full, about half of this
So,
binder we didn't
yes,
get to.
we promise if you're
Right.
at home thinking, why didn't they ask about it? We
Yeah.
just didn't have enough time, truly. But some things that we did talk about, the small towns, it seemed like that really grappled with a lot of people, those of us who are watching here online, hearing them respond specifically to a town like Andrews and some of the infrastructure issues. Did they hit that on the nose?
Well, Suzanne Crouch really did, right? I mean, she was really at her strongest there, clearly knew exactly what was going on in state level government, where the program, where those dollars could come from. I actually thought she was really on point on that kind of piece. I mean, overall, I actually sort of think they maybe have listened to Holcomb, maybe have listened to Mitch Daniels. It was a lot less soundbitey, right? We didn't hear China, we didn't hear Southern invasion, the sort of national talking points that you hear about a lot. They actually sort of went into, some very local programming that Governor Holcomb had put forth. It was a lot more detailed. I don't know if that turns on voters, right? But these are all very competent people who all clearly know what they're doing. That was, I think, an impressive point.
And that's what Governor Holcomb said here in recent days, that he wants to hear more details from these candidates. Yeah. And tonight, perhaps we did on some of these issues at least.
I think we did. And it's always tricky. Like, even in a debate, you get 60, 30, like 15 seconds to be able to elaborate on those, but getting the right questions gets to those kind of answers. And I thought each of the candidates did a good job, especially for their big talking points, being able to find a way to get those in. If you watched the entire debate, you got a strong sense of where they differ on different issues that could be really
Medicinal
valuable.
marijuana was one.
Exactly.
Brad Chambers seemed fairly open to that.
Yeah.
Both Suzanne Crouch and Eric Doden seemed pretty against it. Right. And as for Senator Braun, he's spoken to that issue before in the past that he might support it. Honestly, as I heard him answer that question at first, I thought maybe he was saying he might was maybe not considering medicinal anymore, but then said that he was. So it's certainly an issue that's made news in states all around the Midwest here.
That's right, and Braun was sort of speaking to that there is a problem of regulating something like that is surrounding us right now in other states. But really, I thought the big winner of the night were both of you and Fox
thank you.
59.
Well, thank you.
I thought it was a very substantive debate that we really haven't seen yet. I thought the questions were impeccable. I will say that the option on the best Indiana movie,
which would you go with?
Not having Breaking Away,
There
I think
you
that
go.
was my only criticism that I
Well, I know you're a poor tenderloin
That's right.
guy.
That's right,
You would have
yeah.
definitely answered with the tenderloin question. We had 4 different
Yes.
delicacies in that question. Brad Chambers threw in a none of the above there on that one. But certainly an interesting night. Where do we go from here in terms of the polls? This primary now just a month away. Martin, is there enough time for anyone to catch up to Mike Braun, and are there too many candidates for any of the others to catch up to Mike Braun and his lead in the polls?
Right. I mean, if this were a 2-person race, I mean, Mike Braun, as much as he talks about 2018, and if you know where his polls are now, I don't think more than 41% of Indiana Republicans have ever said, I love Mike Braun, right? They voted for him in a general, but in his primaries, he capped out around 41. He may have a ceiling. With 3 other candidates in the race, that 41 may just be enough.
5 technically, 5 other candidates in the race.
Right,
3 on the
with the other
stage.
2, right,
Yeah.
for sure. But that may just be enough.
Right.
I think Doden and Chambers probably have to look at each other and go, boy, we have these 2 former IEDC guys. Do we both need to be here? It's tough for one person. They always think they're the best. And so I don't expect one of them to drop out. But it's tough to have that sort of duplication in the race.
I think they're all pretty far into it to drop out or consider dropping out at this point. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I was really impressed by how many of the candidates repeatedly said, and I think Braun may have done it the most, I didn't count, but talk about like, well, I've heard from voters, or I've traveled around the
listening
state.
tours as well.
They really did, and they use that to influence their answers, and I think the best public servant does that and uses that to influence their policies and what they actually do in that position, so we could talk about this a year from now, but they frequently reference that, and I think that is something that was really important.
Mike
and nice to
Braun does
highlight.
frequently reference visiting all 92 counties. We've
Yes.
heard him say that a
And
time
being
or
there
two.
every Friday
That could
for
be on
his
the
vote.
bingo card,
Full
potentially,
Braun.
if you had one for the debate. Adam, your final thoughts as we wrap some of this up here today.
I was shocked that Senator Braun's lack of presence at the important spending package vote wasn't brought up tonight, even though a number of candidates have attacked
Just happened
him.
a couple days ago,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, we didn't ask about that specifically, but certainly thought that might be something the candidates might reference.
Yeah,
within the
I guess.
debate.
I mean, they didn't interrupt each other once.
No, we
right?
were we
no
were surprised.
yelling,
Yes.
no yeah buts.
Yeah.
It was pretty impressive that they were controlled
Decorum
by
was
you guys
held.
here, right?
And decorum is good, but also if you're trailing, you've got to sometimes make some of those punches happen, right? I mean, I've heard some people in the press refer to this as a somewhat bland primary, that things haven't jumped out at them much, and certainly they didn't always take the opportunity to strike at each other on some of these issues tonight.
You had that little jab between Doden and Crouch. I think generally I'm impressed when they don't argue too much with each other, and it's the double-edged sword, right? If you're too aggressive,
Right.
then people say, "Oh, where's the respectability in politics
And
anymore?"
we also don't get to hear about the issues when that happens oftentimes and their stances on them.
Exactly, and then you're the people as moderators saying, no, excuse me, we want to get back to the question. I felt like it was actually a really perfect balance in that regard. We got to hear the answers, people got to have the opportunities to respond. Seemed to me very well balanced.
Speaking of the opportunity to respond, we're also going to be interviewing the other two candidates in this race that we mentioned here earlier, Curtis Hill and Jamie Ritenour, on this week's edition of In Focus, as well as the Democratic candidate for governor, Jennifer McCormick, the state superintendent, the former state superintendent, former Republican, now running as a Democrat. So a lot to discuss on this week's edition of In
Yes.
Focus and leading up to this May primary, no doubt.
So we thank you for joining us for the debate and here for our post-debate conversation.
Thank you guys.
Analyzing
Well,
everything. Yes,
yeah.
thank you, and we hope that you enjoyed. And of course, we'll have continued coverage for you this evening at 10 on our news and Newspoint at 11 as well, online at fox59.com. Thank you and good night.
Good night.